The alignment of the Mall, the impressive tree-lined approach to Buckingham Palace, with the palace itself, points directly to Charing Cross, the ancient centre of London, adjacent to Trafalgar Square, from which distances to other places were measured. In the other direction, the alignment passes through an impressive list of interesting places, including 2 other palaces, a large number of which seem to have royal connections. This is a ley line, an alignment of ancient sites, a phenomenon discovered in 1925 by Alfred Watkins of Hereford and found later to represent linear streams of an unknown energy type, but one which seems beneficial to living things. The energy stream of the Buckingham Palace ley was found by dowsing to be about 23 paces wide. The site of Charing Cross is now marked by a statue of Charles I, who was beheaded in Whitehall nearby, but was originally the site of the 13th and final Eleanor Cross, to be raised by Edward I in memory of his wife, Queen Eleanor. Devoted to each other, the Queen, unusually for those times, accompanied Edward on the Crusades, and on one occasion is said to have pulled an arrow from a wound and sucked it clean when it became infected. She was travelling to Scotland to be with him when she died. He accompanied her funeral cortege from Lincolnshire to London, and wherever it stopped he had an ornate cross raised, with statues of her included. There are now only 2 remaining. The Mall is the impressive avenue of trees leading to Buckingham Palace, but it actually predates the building of Buckingham House in 1703. Originally in St James's Park, now it borders it, it was an alley with trees where Charles II, who used the park a great deal, played pall-mall or pell-mell, a game similar to croquet. St James's Park has always been a royal park and never used for anything else. Henry VIII drained it to make a deer park and established the Court of St James. It was laid out for James II with a menagerie and duck decoys. Charles II enhanced it, re-landscaping it in formal French style. John Nash carried out the present less formal layout for George IV, the former Prince Regent. The Mall runs from Admiralty Arch to Buckingham Palace, and the ley runs along it, slightly offset to the left, looking towards the palace. The energy stream was measured at 23 paces. The building which is now the palace was originally Buckingham House, built in 1783 for the Duke of Buckingham, but in 1762 George III bought it for Queen Charlotte, and it was known as the Queen's House. George IV made many alterations, but never lived in it. It was considerably enlarged when it became a palace. The side facing the Mall is a facade, originally built in 1847 and replaced by a design by Sir Aston Webb in 1913. The actual front of the house faces the garden, which has curving paths and a serpentine lake with an island. The ley crosses the main courtyard, slightly to the left as viewed from the Mall, one boundary going through the right-hand edge of the gate tower on the facade, and the other near the left-hand parallel wall. The left-hand boundary runs through the middle of the island in the lake. The ley runs through Buckingham Palace garden and a double-leaning tree there, visible from Grosvenor Place, to St Peter's Church, Eaton Square. This is seemingly of the 18th century Greek temple type of design, and the ley just grazes the northern corner. It has been found that wide leys such as this often have just off points. Leys are certainly not Euclidean straight lines with no width, and this one is fairly wide, about 23 paces. Also, the width of the energy streams of all leys in which it has been tested seems to double at sunrise and sunset, for about 20 minutes each side of the rising and setting, and the whole church will be taken in when this happens. This has been called the solar transition effect, and conjures up in the mind something like a great standing wave of energy following the Terminator as it rushes constantly round the earth. The ley then continues through a small green at a junction in Whitehead's Grove. Was it once a grove? Where the dowsing rod spun, seemingly indicating that more leys cross this one at this point. It then goes to St Luke's Church, Chelsea, an impressive perpendicular style church with a garden with exotic plants adjoining, and several multiple trees. The ley was dowsed crossing the building obliquely and centrally. Fulham Palace, near Putney Bridge, was the riverside residence of the Bishops of London from 704 to 1973. It's said to have had the longest moat in England, and it has beautiful grounds, including a knot garden. These gardens were made famous in the 17th century when Bishop Compton imported rare species of plants, such as magnolia, and grew them in England for the first time. The Ley passes obliquely through the eastern end of the palace and goes through the sites of all three bishops' chapels which have existed there. The medieval one was in the centre of the east end and projected further into what is now the garden. The 18th century one was on the north-east wall, where the two rooms housing the museum now are, and the windows with the pointed tops remain from this. The 19th century chapel is an adjoining church building. There was head hum felt in the two museum rooms, indicating that it's a powerful spot. Neolithic settlement was discovered at Fulham Palace, and several Roman roads converge at a ford, linking two Romano-British communities west of the present parish church. It's not certain if the convergence is on this ley. There were also many earthworks in the area, though it's not certain if these dated from the Iron Age or from Viking settlement in the 9th century. Richmond Park, originally the Manor of Sheen, was enclosed by Charles I as a royal hunting park, but it was against local opposition, and to win back support he allowed pedestrians access. His wall was 8 miles long and enclosed 2,500 acres. Henry VIII is said to have stood on the mound known as Henry VIII's Mound to watch for a rocket fired from the Tower of London to signal that Anne Boleyn had been beheaded. Queen Victoria and Edward VIII both spent time here at White Lodge, and George VI and Queen Elizabeth spent their honeymoon here when the Duke and Duchess of York. Today it's still a deer park. The Ley crosses the park, entering it at the Roehampton Gate, and skirting the edge of Leggermutton Pond, passes through Queen Elizabeth's plantation and the cross tracks leading to White Ash Lodge. There was rodspin at what appeared to be a small mound by a large tree. The ley goes across these trees and through this junction leading to White Ash Lodge. Small mound by the tree was where I got rodspin. Bushy Park was originally 3 parks owned by Cardinal Wolsey. They were taken over by Henry VIII when he fell out of favour and became a royal park. Charles I made a canal to take water to Hampton Court, and during the reign of William and Mary, the Chestnut Avenue and Diana Fountain were laid out by Sir Christopher Wren. During the war, a large US base was established near the Teddington Gate, from which were planned the D-Day landings. The Ley crosses the park, entering on the south side, passing through the Stockyard, now the park headquarters, on the site of a medieval farm which once served Hampton. This is also the junction of 2 tracks and the A388. It passes across the park through a very pleasant wooded area and across the car park on the far side by a twisted tree, touching Bushy House, a Georgian mansion, once the residence of Prime Minister Lord North and the Duke of Clarence when he was heir to the throne. It's now part of the National Physical Laboratory complex. It leaves the park, going through a strange towered house and through the junction of Queen's Road and Park Road, Teddington. St Mary's Church, Walton-on-Thames, originated in Saxon times, some remaining parts from the 12th and 15th centuries. It's on the highest point of the town, with a square flint tower, and the Ley passes through it centrally, then also going through a main crossroads in the town. It's a powerful church and the centre of several good leys, and I will always remember it as the place where I first recognised head hum, the apparent tone in the head, places where earth energies are high. Walton was a small village surrounded by royal parks until 1800s. There is also a brass to John Selwyn in the church. He was a 16th century keeper of the royal park at Oatlands. There is a poem attributed to Elizabeth I by the pulpit, apparently an answer to a query as to what she believed about the communion service. Christ was the word and spake it, he took the bread and brake it, and what the word doth make it, that I believe and take it. The church has a large triple tree in the churchyard on the Ley, and at the field trip on July 21st, 2001, it was found to be powerful, and lines could be detected radiating in several directions from it. This would seem to be correct, for a number of lines have been previously found to be going through it. The Ley skims the edge of the site of the main buildings of Henry VIII's palace at Oatlands, running through the moat that surrounded it. Moats are noted by Alfred Watkins as often occurring on Leys. The palace was part of the honour of Hampton Court, his huge hunting domain, and was where he brought his new but ill-fated wife, Catherine Howard. This model of the palace in its heyday is in Weybridge Museum, which has a permanent exhibition about it. Very little remains today, however, except one archway leading to the stables and a length of wall. The palace was demolished during the Civil War, little more than a century after it was built, and many of its bricks used to construct the new Way navigation. There is an interesting mention in the history of Oatlands by J.W. Linder's Forge of the secret passages with which one is solemnly assured the whole district is riddled. One went to Hampton Court, one went to Windsor Castle, and one went all the way to London. The actual vaults under the palace site were Tudor drains, Mr. Forge tells us, and it's hardly likely that a passage of some length to reach London could exist. But the tunnel legends have elsewhere been indications of the existence of Leys, and it's certainly interesting that a connection with London existed in their tradition. In the 18th century, the area became Oatlands Park, an extensive landscape garden with a pond called the Broad Water mimicking a river. This is somewhat different in shape now, but the Ley ran along it and through a Doric temple, which was part of the landscaping. In the 18th century, the area became Oatlands Park, an extensive landscaped garden with a pond called the Broad Water mimicking a river. This is somewhat different in shape now, but the Ley ran along it and through a Doric temple, which was part of the landscaping.
It must be like a walled garden, I should think. Yes. I think St Mary's Church.
The village of Woodham, adjacent to Newhaugh and Addlestone, has a long history, being mentioned in the Charter of Chertsey Abbey in 933, as having been part of the lands given to the abbey by the Saxon Prince Thistwald. The church, however, is relatively modern and about 3 miles away from the original hamlet, on the edge of Horsell Common. It was built in 1894 when the then squire, Mr. Stevens, was dissatisfied with the churches in Woking, wanting something more Anglo-Catholic. There is nothing known to have been there previously except the common, although the adjacent Six Crossroads Junction was marked on the first edition Ordnance Survey map as a large multi-junction on the common. The Buckingham Palace Ley goes through both. When visiting the church, however, something unusual was found. The church seems to be partly surrounded by a circular bank and ditch. Older churches in circular churchyards, such as St Nicholas, Hereford, are suspected by archaeologists as having been built on a prehistoric site. This one not only has the circular form, but the bank and ditch too, looking almost like a small henge monument. Can it be that this late 19th century church, with nothing known here before, was built on an unrecognised prehistoric site? The Six Crossroads Junction was marked on the first edition Ordnance Survey map as a large multi-junction on the Horsell Common. Roads radiate from it to Chertsey, Addlestone, Woking, Ottershaw, Chobham and Byfleet. The Ley passes through it, as well as the nearby All Saints Church, Woodham, and one of the roads, Woodham Road, not to be confused with Woodham Lane, which runs from Newhaugh to the church, is coincident with it in its first stretch. This road runs through a small wooded part of Horsell Common, and seems somewhat reminiscent of the Mall. The first church on the site of Horsell Church was probably built in the 12th century, and parts of the wall may remain. Many additions, alterations and restorations were done in the 14th, 15th, 18th, 19th and 20th centuries. Even though the area at the top of the hill is very limited, the churchyard falling steeply away at the back. The site is striking and the church seems powerful, with strong head hum experienced. At the field trip on July 21st, 2001, the strange mixture of stones comprising the south wall was noticed, and it was theorised that some could be standing stones on an earlier site here. Faint circular indications in the ground behind the church were also noticed, and there were feelings that this could have been a hilltop stone circle. A powerful ley was dowsed crossing the church, but it was at right angles to the Buckingham Palace ley, and strong concentration and filtering were needed before it was eventually picked up, very much more weakly.
Stones broken up into building blocks.
It's very strange because this furnace slag in this form is usually produced in the Industrial Revolution.
Well, I said what could have happened was we put a whole load of building rubble lying on the ground, and the builders just picked up the first thing they saw.
This is conglomerate.
So is this separate? Okay, I thought it was like a pudding stone. Doesn't make sense, does it? It isn't even elegant. And if you go further up, you've got courses of stone on the next bit, you know, that don't match any of this. I just can't understand this building at all.
It's a very strange mixture of materials,
isn't it? And I think different ages. See, look at that. And when you get around the corner, it's brand new.
I wonder if this... We don't know that that's always in its original position.
No, we don't. And that's very clumsily put together.
Yeah.
That's not
so I'm wondering if the church was extended. Because this is a whole complete section, isn't it? Perhaps it was much cruder before.
Could have been.
Because that...
You would expect that to be dressed, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that
it's like the rubble filling.
It's furnace slag, and they didn't produce that in that sort of quantity.
See, that's like a pudding stone at the top. Well, it could have been a Roman stoneworks, and that would have kept the Roman tiles, Roman bricks.
Yeah. Even that shows sign of heat, doesn't it?
Yes. And here you've got quite a drop in the ground there. Now I'm walking straight into it. Feeling quite strong. It's getting worse, it's getting worse. This is where you said, was it?
I started there.
Yes.
I came to maximum there.
Yeah.
I don't say it suddenly stopped there, but my
so you say the centre's there.
Yeah.
And I say it's somewhere around here, so we're we're within a foot of each other, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd say it's flowing that way.
And we got a diagonal on the church as well, so
And
Alan
Jim,
also picked it up here. He came to a maximum point there. He kept the tail off, which some people do.
well, Jimmy, your line could be on the other way, the other direction, but it's being completely masked by this one if it's there. Can't pick it up at all.
That's down these
People's houses.
I wouldn't particularly like to be in a house on this line.
They're very
Not a very nice energy at all.
So I did pick something up on the corner, round there, Jimmy.
This church, dedicated to the Saxon boy king Edward, who was murdered at Corfe Castle in the year 978, is another unlikely place of worship to be found on a ley. This is another quite recent church, built adjacent to the site of one of the railway stations in Brookwood Cemetery, the vast necropolis set aside to receive the ever-growing numbers of London's dead in the 19th century. It's owned by the St Edward Brotherhood, who tend the shrine of St Edward, and which contains some of the remains of the boy king, discovered at Shaftesbury, where he was originally buried, and confirmed by archaeologists as having injuries matching those reportedly received by Edward. Once again, as with Woodham Church, there is no record of any other church or older site here. The church was built in 1909 as a second Anglican chapel in the cemetery, and then sold to the St Edward Brotherhood in 1982 for £28,000. At the field trip on July the 21st, 2001, rod spin and head hum were experienced, seeming to indicate a ley centre, and the diagonal ley direction of the Buckingham Palace ley seemed to be confirmed.
No, it's just that we're going across there, isn't it? And